what kind of process she wants to. I suppose it will be helpful in that way too for you. Now, Ezgi Kiracli graduated from English Language and Literature Department in 2001. She got her BA degree from Bilkent University. In 2002, she got the teacher's certificate from Hart and Ezgi Kiracli. Since 2003, she has been working at Ankara University, Tömer, as an English teacher. In 2008, she was accepted to Çankaya University for a MA degree in the Department of English Language and Cultural Studies. And in 2011, she graduated from her MA program with a thesis entitled Poetry to Save the Nation, Politics in the Poems of John Milton. So I think she'll elaborate on John Milton's work further today, and particularly on Book 1, 2, 4, and 5. Let's listen to Ezgi Kiracli. Let's welcome her, please.
Presentation. So let's start with our introduction to Civil War and John Milton. So before starting to process on John Milton, I think it is better to analyze the Civil War and John Milton because they are integrated. Civil War started in 1642 because the Commons wanted to limit its power. Not King Charles I was against their demands, so they came to opposition. From then on, the side that fought with the king was called the royalists, and the side that fought with the parliament was called the parliamentarians. During the first battle of Ezgi, John Milton wrote this poem when the assault was intended to the city in 1642. In this poem, John Milton wanted his house to be protected against the attacks. The Battle of Ezgi ended with no victories for both sides, and the attack didn't happen. Then in 1643, the Solomon Bilkent Covenant was signed with the Scottish Covenanters against the Royalists. And in 1645, the new model army was found under the commander of Thomas Fairfax, and this army gained victories. At the end of the First Civil War, Charles I escaped to Scotland and made negotiation against the parliamentarians. So John Milton, in his poems written in 1647 and in 1648, referred this act as false note and broken link. Second Civil War started for this reason, and it ended with the execution of Charles I and declaration of the Commonwealth. And during this time, John Milton was elected as Oliver Cromwell's Secretary of Foreign Affairs, and during this post, he published two important prose works, Ecclesiastes and the Tenure of King and Magistrates. In Ecclesiastes, John Milton refers the deifying of the king, and in Tenure of King and Magistrates, Milton tries to justify the regicide. And the Third Civil War started because Charles II was crowned in Scotland. And the war again ended with the parliamentarians' victory. Cromwell gained victory in Dunbar in Scotland, Wexford and Drogheda in Ireland, and Worcester in England. And in 1651, Milton published the first defense against St. Massius. And here, John Milton defended that the British nation deserves freedom because they are the children of free women. So, talking about John Milton, we can say that he is a poet who writes political poems during the Civil War and after the Civil War. And he wrote political prose works again. And also, during his post, he kept kept his belief for the nation until restoration in 1660, and after the restoration, until his death, he believed this. So if we start with Paradise Lost, it is actually an epic poem which invokes the muse and which has leading characters, Satan and God. Here we have the similarity between Satan's state of mind and Milton's state of mind. So in book 1, 2, 4, and 5, you see this microcosm written, metaphorically created by John Milton, which is ruled under the tyrant. So in that case, we see their similarities against the tyrant and against the heavenly king. And talking about the second theme of Paradise Lost, I can say it's free will, which is weaved in book 3, 4, 8, and 9. And these books suggest that free will determines our destination. So it is the acts that prepare our salvation or damnation, not it is predestination. So if we start book 1, you see that we are informed here two civil wars that Satan initiated against God. So during the first civil war, he and his army were vanquished, and they were hurled headlong from the eternal sky, the lightness of heaven, to bottomless perdition, the hell. In the second civil war he initiated, he acted with envy and revenge. So he was able to deceive the mother of mankind, Eve. He tempted Eve to eat the fruit of the forbidden tree, the tree of knowledge. And you have the handout here. The lines end with who dares define the omnipotent arm. So this is the punishment given to those who challenge, who dare to challenge the omnipotent, the God. Okay, we see now Satan in adamantine chains, in hell fire. So even if he is in desperate situation, he doesn't lose his hope. So in John Rogers' verse, he is able to recover and thinks, not the field be lost. So we see Satan that he doesn't lose his hope. So he is determined to initiate a second war against God. And he says that, okay, our battle hasn't lost yet. We haven't lost the battle yet because there is one will to conquer. And how can we conquer? Again, you have your handout here. It is written that the study of revenge, immortal hate. So we can conquer our will, which seems unconquerable, with study of revenge, immortal hate, and rejection to obey the God and plead for his grace, and plead, supply me and deify his power. So Satan implies that the king has subjects who deify his power, who idolize his power, with supplying me, begging the king for his grace. But Satan says that no, we won't become one of the king's subjects. We would reject this subjection. So we should declare war. And he says the king is our big enemy. And he is the now sole king in heaven. So it is the sole ruler. There is no one else. So he is the tyrant. So we should declare war against the tyrant, because the tyrant holds tyranny in his hands. And for talking about deifying and idolatry, I can say that they are similar, both for Satan and both for Milton, because Milton also is against idolatry. He thinks that idolatry, deifying, is a product of superstition. So he thinks that the images, the icons should be abhorred, shouldn't be used. So it is the same state of mind we see in Satan when he says we should reject to deify the God's power. And now we see Satan, as I said before, stretching out over the lake of fire, and he is in chain. Next to him you see Beelzebub. So they are talking now to each other. And then we see Satan standing upright position. So the determination to rebel against God, to reject, to obey the king, creates his power. So he's able to unchain himself. He's able to set himself free and break all the chains that surrounds him. Although they are adamantine chains, they are invincible chains. They were hard to be broken, but he is able to break them because he is determined to challenge the king. So it gives him the power. So we see the same power in Milton when he wants his nation to break all his chains that surround them. Because during the Civil War, the king was a tyrant. So the Civil War initiated because of the tyrant. So Milton, in Periodica, written in 1644, states that methinks I see a noble and a prudent nation, rosing herself like a free man after a long sleep, and shaking her invincible locks. So invincible locks has the same term when we see here with the invincible chains. So in both of these contexts, we see that chains symbolize confined freedom, and while breaking them symbolize freedom and rebellion against the tyrant, and rebellion for rebellion. Then now we see Satan here talking to hell. And we see that now he adopts in hell. So actually hell was given to him as a punishment, and it was his ordained punishment. But now we see Satan challenging this punishment, and he sees hell no more a prison, but he sees hell as a place to conduct his battle against the tyrant, against the king. So he sees that he can use hell for their own advantage, and says that a mind not to be changed by place or time. The mind is its own place, and it's itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. So as he lives in hell, hell also lives in him. So it is in his mind. So wherever he goes, he will take hell with him. And it is the foreshadowing actually what he is going to do in book 4. When he sees Adam and Eve in book 4, he says that I will bring woe to them, I will bring hell. So at the end he reaches his aim. Adam and Eve were expelled to heaven, to the earth. So he has the mind to determine his fate, and he can create a hell out of heaven. And so he also states that why should they be here? Why should they live in hell? He says that, okay, we should live in hell because it is a free place for us to start our battle against God, because it is secluded by the king. So we can easily pursue our unconquerable will. So to challenge the tyrant, it is an unconquerable will. So by living here, they can easily reach their aim. And he adds that it is better to reign in hell. It's better to rule in hell rather than to be a servant in the hands of a tyrant in heaven. And Satan also talks about the king, and he says that he who reigns on his throne, upheld by old repute, consent or custom, and his regal state. So this is the king set on his throne, and he was supported by old reputation, approval, and custom. So the old reputation, people believe that the king is blessed. But for Satan, they shouldn't believe it because the king actually is a tyrant. So for Satan, the people who are the subject of the king don't actually know that who they idolize is a tyrant, because they are bewildered, they are bewitched into the superstition of idolatry and custom. So they don't know really that when they idolize his power, is actually a tyrant who restricts their freedom. And then Satan asks, for who can think submission more than war? So again, he repeats that they won't become one of the king's subjects, and they should reject it. So they should declare war. And in Economistis, for example, Milton says that war against tyrants is glorious because it is for the common liberty. So this is the same state of mind we see Satan here when he says war, then war, so they should declare war. But he doesn't decide by himself. He says open or understood must be resolved. So they should discuss it in their parliament, which is called pandemonium. So Book 2 opens with Satan in the pandemonium. And you see Satan here on his throne talking to his followers. But there is a difference between how the king talks and how Satan talks. When the king talks, he restricts their freedom, he acts tyrantly. And there isn't a parliament in heaven. But in hell, we see the parliament here that shares Satan's freedom, Satan's power. So in a way, we see a constitutional parliament here. Whereas in heaven, we see just the king, and there is no parliament to share his power. So the king becomes a tyrant, but Satan doesn't act tyrantly. And he says that I was created by two things. First, I was created by the your leader, the king, because the fixed of heaven created me. The fixed of heaven is the reason why I am here now. And second, it is the free choice. So I choose to be in hell rather than to be in heaven. And this is the free choice, freedom of choice that he gives to his members. Either in approval or in fine, they should discuss the matters in their parliament. So they have a democratic system here. And also it is an established free throne we see here because it is away from the tyrant, from the king. And everybody has their own free choice to express their opinions. It is the same ideal system that Milton also has in his mind. In, for example, Ready and Easy Way, Milton states that the happiness of a nation must be certain in free council, where no single person rules. So this is the same system we see here. Okay, so hell is secluded by the tyrant, and there is no single person to rule. Everybody contributes to this parliament. And also in the Ready and Easy Way again, John Milton writes, a free commonwealth without single person is best government. So again, Milton also states that he preferred a free commonwealth, but it shouldn't be ruled with a tyrant. The king should be willing to share his power. So there should be a contract between the king and his public. And then you see these two members of Satan's parliament, Moloch and Mammon. Okay, they express their opinions to discuss whether to declare war or not. And Moloch says that we should declare war against God and we should declare war against the torturer. And we should have a sufficient army to disturb his heaven. So his throne, it may be impossible to dethrone him, but it is, if we have revenge, it is also something. Even if we don't victory, we have revenge, he says. But Milton thinks similarly like Milton does. He says that suppose he should relent and publish grace in all. So suppose that the king is forgiving and he gives his grace to all of us. On promise made made of new subjects. And so if on condition that we should be one of his subjects, how can we, he say, stand in his presence humble? How can we stand in his presence with supplying need? Because we know that he has strict laws in heaven. So how can we endure these laws? So how can we live knowing these rules are imposed by the tyrant? And how can we celebrate his throne with singing hymns to his Godhead? Fourth Hallelujah. So he says that, okay, the subjects of the king sing hymns to his throne because the king creates a fear and an obedience system in heaven. So the people inevitably becomes the subject of the king. Either they are willing or they are forced to. And some of them are forced because they know the king has no limits. So they are afraid of the king. So for this reason, they become the subject of the king and they idolize the king. And they're singing hymns, but they are forced hymns. So he adds that we should accept what is hard, it is to gain freedom. And we shouldn't accept what is easy, the yoke of bondage, the being captivity of the king. And observe the home. So we should accept the magnificence of heaven, he says. Again, for example, in Ecclesiastes, Milton thinks the same as Memnon thinks. And he says that the king's subjects are bewitched into such a blind and obstinate belief that they are never mistaken in the object of their worship. So they don't know really who they worship, but they think that they aren't mistaken. However, they are mistaken because the king is a tyrant, and if he imposes this strict laws, then it should be impossible to be the subject of the king. Also, in the tenure of king and magistrates, Milton states that people, the subject, they find, idolize the tyrant because they aren't governed by reason, but they are governed by double tyranny, which is custom and blind affection. So when they show their love to the king, they have this blind affection. They are too blind to see that the king actually is a tyrant, but they think that he is blessed, he is sacred. And also, one more thing about Milton. And also Milton defines the tyrant in the tenure of king and magistrates. He says that the tyrant is accompanied with innumerable wrongs and oppressions. So by knowing the tyrant, people shouldn't submit him. People should show their objection to the king. But they can't because we have the strict laws here, and people are afraid of the king because he has no limits. His power has no limits. And in book 4, we see Satan in paradise. And he sneaks into paradise. And there he sees the tree of knowledge. And he doesn't understand why the king forbids them to eat the tree of knowledge, the forbidden tree. And he can't understand why being ignorant can be their happy state. So how can they live in ignorance without knowing what is good and what is evil? So it is again one of the restrictions of the king. But the king forbids them freedom of choice, freedom of knowledge. And Milton in Eurydica again states that good and evil are like two twins, and they should grow together because we need both good and evil to have our wisdom, to decide either of them, to make a choice between good and evil. If we don't have good and just evil, it doesn't make any sense. If we have evil and not good, it doesn't make any sense either. We need to have both of them to make our choice, so that we can know what to choose. So they are together. You can't simply eliminate one of them. It is the parable also you can read in Bible. It is the parable is entitled "Wheat and Tares." It is Matthew 13, chapter 13. So in Matthew it is stated that when the farmer collects wheat and tares, he shouldn't simply eliminate one of them. First, he collects both of them, wheat and tares. Then he should separate them. So even in the Bible, it's stated that you should be tolerable to good and evil. So Satan is acting like Milton here. He also gives tolerance to freedom of choice. In his parliament, every one of his members has freedom of expression and freedom of choice. They freely express their ideas clearly. And in Milton also, in Milton's mind, there should also be tolerance, freedom of expression, freedom of choice. So you should express freely your own ideas, what you think free. So God doesn't show his tolerance, so he sent Satan back to the hell. So Satan is against us. Satan thinks that we should have freedom of choice and expression. So people should express what do they think clearly. In Of Civil Power, for example, written in 1659, Milton states that no man or body of man in these times can be the judges or determiners to any other man's consciences but their own. So even Milton, written in this prose book written in 1659, states that we should be tolerant to each other and we shouldn't judge each other for our opinion, because we should express our opinions freely, no matter what it is. It can be for or against opinion, but we should hear these different opinions. And even in Second Defense, written in 1654, Milton states that it's a free commonwealth, that everybody hears their opinions freely. So when we come to the last chapters, we see God speaking to his followers, and Satan speaks to his followers. So God starts with his speech, saying that, "Hear all you angels, prodigy of light, thrones, dominations, Christendoms, virtues and powers. Hear my decree, hear my law, which in unrevoked shall stand. This day I have begot whom I declare, my only Son. And on this holy hill him have anointed, whom ye know, behold, at my right hand, your head I him appoint." So in his speech, God says that, okay, now I appoint my Son as my deputy. So you should show the same obedience you have shown me. And he says that if one of you shows objection, then your fate will be like Satan's fate. You will be expelled from heaven to utter darkness. And this is your ordained prison. So he shows that in a way this is tyrannic side. He restricts again freedom of opinion. So he forces people to show their obedience to his Son now. And for Satan, it is false again. So he said that the reason why we meet here is because the king declares his son as a second tyrant. So he says that our minds and teach us to cast off this yoke. Will you submit your necks and choose to them to supply you? You will not. If I trust to know you right, or if you know yourselves are being ordained to govern, not to serve. So he said, okay, one is too much for us to endure. Now how can we endure for the second one? It's impossible for us. to show our obedience, both for the king and his son. So what should we do? We should again reject the supplying king, and we should again reject to obey his son, as we showed our disobedience to the king. And he says, are being ordained to govern, not to serve. So it is also the same lines just that John Milton used in the tenure of king and magistrates. He says that in the tenure of king and magistrates, we are born to govern. We aren't born to serve. So Satan also thinks the same. Satan also thinks that they are born to govern. They aren't born to be the servants of the king, because they deserve freedom. And this is the same thing that Milton has in mind. Milton also wants his nation to be free, because for him they are children of free woman, Sarah, but not the bondwoman, Hagar. So you see in Satan and in Milton's mind how they are similar, and even if it's metaphorically reflected, how they act similarly in their ways, in their choices, and how you see that Satan's power is also Milton's power, and like Satan, Milton also is against tyrants and defends a free commonwealth. And he says that the commonwealth should be ruled under the hegemony of the tyrant, but it should be ruled with a constitutional parliament, so that the king shouldn't be a tyrant, but should be a democratic ruler. So thank you very much.
Hart for making this talk a part of his class to begin with. So that was a nice integration to the major writers of the Renaissance class. Thanks for listening to Ezgi, and I'd like to thank Ezgi for this talk. I think we need to ask some questions or perhaps make some comments on the talk before we give a break. A short one where you can refresh yourselves and talk to Ezgi about some different things. And in the second hour, we'll have a workshop on John Milton. So thank you, Ezgi. Please welcome your questions.
My friends, my teachers.
I'm waiting for somebody else to go first, but I've got lots. First of all, thank you. I think that's a really nice introduction to Paradise Lost, and it's such a huge, complex poem. It's very difficult to get to grips with it in 40, 50 minutes. I think something I might mention in our sort of workshop session is sort of, I suppose, to simplify it a lot, two ways the poem has been read. The Romantics way, the way poets like Shelley and Blake read Paradise Lost, who see Satan as the great hero, the great rebel, and as you kind of suggested, I think, perhaps the great democrat as well, who runs a parliament where each devil has an opportunity to speak, not like God, who sits on his throne and tells everyone what to do. The other reading, I suppose, which has dominated recently, is the argument that no, this is showing us, this, in a sense, this book is teaching us how to read, and that Satan is diabolical. So, sorry, this is a very long way of coming to a question about, I just wondered for you, is Satan, first of all, do you go with the romantic reading or not? Or is Satan a kind of, is Satan a tyrant, but of a different sort? One who dominates perhaps by using language, using rhetoric, using clever words rather than an old-fashioned tone. Sorry, I'll leave it there.
No, it's okay. I think that Satan is a tyrant in a way because his way of speech encourages people. So he can't say anything to Satan when he begins to speak. So in a way he assimilates, people surrounding him. So they have to also accept Satan's word. And the last, for example, in book 4 you see that they are abashed and they follow Satan. So Beelzebub even follows Satan when he breaks the chains. Then we see Beelzebub also breaking his chains and follow Satan. So in a way, Satan, yes, acts tyrannically because his use of language is like powerful, but like Milton's language is also powerful. So I think like John Register, Milton's power and the power of Milton is reflected into Satan and Satan's power. While expressing why should they be free, why should they be free, why should they reject the king. So, okay,
Point on that. It may not be a question of either or, but it could perhaps be both. As I said, it's remarkable that Milton uses words about God, supposedly he's on the side of God, supposedly we're against them, but he describes God as, he uses words like monarch, consent or custom, regal state, old repute. These are the very terms that he's been using in his attack on monarchy in Tenure of Kings and Magistrates.
Yes.
So it's remarkable that we find these words put into the mouth of Satan. But perhaps Milton isn't siding with Satan, perhaps unconsciously, in trying to give life to this character and to fill out this character. He's been using material from his own experience. That it's not a deliberate decision to make Satan into a hero.
of course, yes. I think that his just mind is reflected into Satan's mind. So through Satan, he tries to state what he wants to say to his nation. So instead of Milton, Satan does this job for Milton. So Satan says words that Milton wants to say. So I thought this way. So metaphorically, unconsciously even, Milton gives this duty to Satan to speak for his nation, talking about his freedom nation, and the king has this regal state, and he is supported by the old repute. So this is what I think.
So.
I'm sorry, just to continue with Dr. Starr's word about Milton, I wonder, has he ever been, John Milton, supporting the king? Has he ever been on the side of the king, the monarch, in his lifetime? Or has he been a Republican all the way through?
Actually, I considered at first 1629, for example. He celebrated the king because when he went back to Spain without the bride, without the Catholic bride, he celebrates the king and he praises him. But then it turns out to be worse when the king initiated the bishop war with William Laud. So this creates a crisis for Milton because at that time he was doing his MA, if I am not mistaken. Then because of this bishop war, because the king was determined to spread the Bible to Scotland, because Scotland at that time was using, and still uses the general Bible. But for the king, it should be their own Bible. So it creates the bishop wars. So at that time, Milton was in his MA, then he alienates himself from being a minister, then he gives himself to self-study. So at that time, we can say that now he changes his mind, because he went to Hammersmith for individual studies, then he went to Italy, for example, for the tour. Then when he heard the Civil War started, in second defense, for example, he said, I rushed back to England when I heard Civil War. So he began to attack against the king. So this is a sign when we say this Milton and Satan clash. So I can say that. But at first, yes, he wasn't a protest of kingship. Then it turns out to be that way. My friends?
I'll pick it up again. Yeah, I was just picking up on what you're saying. I was thinking, what you were saying before goes back to, again, Blake saying that Milton was a poet and therefore of the devil's part without knowing it. So I think that fits. The other thing I wondered about is when Milton presents Pandemonium, the kingdom or the republic of Satan, of the devils. And it's weird, Milton hardly ever uses the word devils. I wondered if you had any thoughts about that. But do you think Pandemonium is a sort of representation or a figure for the parliaments of the Civil War and the era of the Republic, or the
when I
dictatorship
read
of Cromwell?
Satan's lines about the kingship and tyranny, and when I read in book 1, this is line 672, when they start to begin to build Pandemonium, floor by floor, so, and by the architect, Master. So I thought that now they're creating their own parliament. But also we see Satan on the throne. Then I thought, okay, we have Satan here on the throne, and we have this Pandemonium. So I thought that, okay, then Pandemonium is their own parliament. Satan is the king, but he doesn't act like a king. He acts like what Milton thinks what an ideal commonwealth to be. So I thought that, okay, the parliament now shares Satan's power. So Satan doesn't act tyrant. So there is a contract between Satan's members and Satan. So they share Satan's power. For example, even if he says here, open or understood must be resolved, he doesn't act by his own decision. He says we should decide together. So if he's acted, then he says, okay, then I say war, so let's go. But he doesn't say so. He says, okay, we should discuss it together. And I think so. This is their parliament.
And it's interesting looking at the vocabulary. I'm just looking at it again. He describes it as the royal camp. They're on line 6, 7, 8.
Yes.
But I think maybe more generally at that time, or certainly in the sort of a little earlier, before the Civil War, and this connects to what you were saying about his praise for the monarch.
Yes.
The idea of a monarchy and a republic are not kind of as sort of separated, as distinct as they are for us today. I think, for us, okay, you can have a monarchy or you can have a republic. They're two different things. But in the late 16th century, the early 17th century, a monarchical republic is something you hear talked about a lot. And the republic can mean just the system of government. So I don't know. I haven't thought this through, but it feels like here you have that. The Civil War is obviously the period when those two terms,
Yes.
I imagine, start to become mutually exclusive. But it feels like they're still not quite here. There's, you know, just because you're a monarchy still perhaps doesn't necessarily mean you're not.
You're a Republican.
Yeah, you're not a Republican.
I think this. Okay, yes. It sounds a bit different, but for example, now in Britain we have this constitutional monarchy. Now we have the Queen and the Parliament. So the Queen is adored because she doesn't act tyrannically. Yes, she is adored by people.
Not by me, I'd like to.
No,
but yes, I take it.
I mean that there is no, you can say, even democracy in Britain, we can say. So people express their ideas freely. No one acts against them. So I think what I mean by Satan saying Republican.
I think I'm right to say the word parliament doesn't occur.
It doesn't exist in paradise, but I think that it should be, maybe it's a parliament because it acts like a parliament because we don't see Satan as a king. Although yes,
He
he's a
doesn't
king.
really talk like a king.
Yes.
He doesn't talk to anybody, he doesn't talk like a nobleman. He's much more one of us, and he's willing.
Yes, also it is the place where he comes from. He comes from hell with his members. So he is one of them. So
He's willing to talk with them on more or less equal terms, whereas the monarch God not in heaven is unapproachable.
I'm sorry, I know that your concern is mostly on Satan, and you talked about John Milton's view too. But have you got anything related with Adam and Eve or?
I can say a little bit about Adam and Eve from Milton's doctrine on divorce, for example. Okay, Adam and Eve are created as a couple, and so they also show their obedience to each other. But in doctrine of divorce, we read that Milton says we can easily get a divorce if this marriage brings unhappiness to man, but not women. So in a way, we can say when Adam also eats this apple, it's because he is obedient to Eve. So I can say a little bit of this. Okay. I'm sorry. No?
You did bring up the question of the fruit of the tree of knowledge.
Yes.
And relates.
Yes, of course. The tree of knowledge is it's in book 4. Sorry. Okay, yes. God forbids the tree of knowledge, and because for him knowledge should be restricted, because he acts like a tyrant, the king. So if people know what is good and what is bad, then they would question the tyrant. So metaphorically, since Adam and Eve don't know what is good and what is bad, they show their obedience to the king. But for Satan, what Satan can't understand, how can they live in ignorance? How can they not question why the tree is restricted? But they don't question because they show their obedience to God's punishment.
Maybe it's a kind of censorship from God.
Exactly, so the censorship, yes. Exactly so.
Milton has a lot to say about censorship.
Yes, in Vertigo, for example, he says that we need good opinions and bad opinions, so they shouldn't be unlicensed. Even, for example, in 1652, he licensed the publication of Society Doctrine even. We can say that he is tolerant to different beliefs. So his toleration is again reflected into Satan's toleration. My friends?
I don't know, I was just thinking, Milton also, I mean, in Areopagitica, he also kind of speaks in favour of a kind of censorship at some point. I'm digging around the reference, I can't remember it. Well, we can argue about it. he does say it's greatest concern to the Church and Commonwealth to have a vigilant eye how books demean themselves as well as men. And there is this idea of the book as a person, as a
Yes,
kind of
and
live being that could be subject to punishment.
for example, Milton said to kill a book is like to kill a person
Yeah.
and to kill a mind. So okay, when you analyze it, when you put censorship into the book, then it's as if you kill a person and you kill the reason itself. He says we need wisdom to make this choice.
But of course, the kind of flip side of that is that people get put in prison and locked away and punished and nasty
Yeah,
things.
and his two books were ordered to be read, for example, the first defense and the economics, for example. Yes. And he was blind when he was in prison. Unfortunately, yes. So for this reason, he says that I am. He says we say here, calling out hell. So because Milton also now is in hell himself because he was blind and he was in prison.
Shall we continue with the seminar and for answers? Results of working. So we can perhaps have the workshop, but before that, if the attendants would like to ask some other questions, we can take them too.
Maybe people will be happier and more informal with the drinking. One-on-one, not having to stand up and defend. Okay.